So it's the first period break here in the Storm shelter. Manchester Storm 1, the University of Manitoba Bisons 0. And I have got a great guest joining us during this first period break. And old school Manchester Storm fans will hopefully be very familiar. Born in Saskatchewan, made his way to these shores back in 1994 to play for the Trafford Metros in the old British Division 1. And from there, he made a move into a brand new hockey franchise that started in Manchester. Not a million miles away from where he was at the time, and to be fair, he did his fair share to put those guys on the map, whoever they were, clinching promotion in the first season into what became the Ice Hockey Super League. That club was, of course, the Manchester Storm, and that player is stood right next to me. It's a great pleasure to welcome Martin Smith to Storm TV. Martin, welcome to Altrincham, or welcome back to Altrincham.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be back, and you know, I spent 3 years in Manchester, really lived in the Altrincham Sale area for all 3 years, so really this is a second home for me.
What's it like watching the Storm again? I mean, obviously you went back to your native Canada after you finished your playing career with the Telford Tigers here in the UK. You went back to Canada. I mean, did you even know that the Storm had reformed?
Well, I did, because I follow it on, you know, on Facebook. Obviously, a lot of the supporters are putting, you know, posts on and how excited they were that the hockey was back, and for me, even though when the Phoenix got going again it wasn't the same, but once the Storm had fired up again, you know, I talked to my wife and we were planning a trip over here at some time, and I said I really have to get back and get to a game, and I'm just ecstatic to be here right now. Well,
it's great to have you in the shelter, and really, really good to have a chance to chat with you as well. Now, just kind of let's hark back to your playing career just a little bit. You came to us from the ECHL. That's something that a lot of players in the Elite League currently do. There's a lot of East Coast stars making their way over to the UK. I mean, can you remember what your first thoughts were of British hockey when you first got over here? We're going back 20 years, I appreciate that. What were your first thoughts of British hockey?
Well, you know what, both my parents are from the UK. My dad was from Scotland, my mum is from Newcastle. So I knew a bit about the game, plus Daryl Lipsey grew up just doors down from where my parents live, and still his parents or his mum is just a few doors down from my mum. So I had got to know a little bit about the ice hockey, but until I was here, it was different than the East Coast Hockey League. At that time, my first year with Trafford, you could only have 5 imports, 2 dual nationals, and 3 imports, which we had 3 Russians on our team, and you could only have 3 on the ice at one time. So, you know, we were targets out there, because if they got one of the imports off, then all of a sudden you were playing with only 2. So the game was different, but that next year in Manchester, and I talk about it all the time, it was the highlight of my hockey career, that first year with the Storm.
What was that like? Because obviously it was a brand new franchise. You kind of made the jump from Trafford to Manchester, unknown entity at the time. I mean, what can you remember about those very early days of the Manchester Storm?
Well, I actually didn't sign till September. It was around the 19th or 20th, and they had played a couple of games, and I had heard that management weren't happy with how the team was shaping up, so they made some roster changes, signed me, signed Sean Byram, signed John Finney, and we came over, and we went on you know, one heck of a winning streak, and the fans, they were into the game right from day one. It was such a great atmosphere. We had such a good connection with the supporters, and I think that's what kind of set us apart from a lot of the other clubs. We were playing in front of anywhere from, you know, 7,000-8,000 to 17,500 people, and they all felt a part of it. And when we won the championship that year, I think they all felt that they had a part or a hand in that championship.
Well, talking of your time in a Storm jersey, season number 1 in a Storm jersey, I've got the stats here. Played 51, scored 79, 88 assists. That's not a bad start, was it?
Well, I played on a line with Sean Byram and Hilton Ruggles, and well, Hilton wasn't the best skater, but Sean and I just said, we'll get you the puck in the slot and you finish. And then Sean was so big and a great centerman, had some NHL experience. He worked the corners really well. And I just kind of brought a little bit of the energy, and scoring had been, you know, my forte back in Canada. So coming here, I knew that, you know, we kind of had 3 guys that kind of gelled really well together, and we had a lot of success.
If you could pick one, I'm guessing there's many. I mean, over the last couple of years, we had Mike Morin, who of course you played with, had his jersey retirement here last year. We asked him the same question. Brad Rubachuk was over a couple of years ago when we retired his number. We asked him this question. It's a difficult one because I know there was plenty. If you could pick one highlight of your time during the Storm, what would it be?
We were playing against the Paisley Pirates. We were down 7-3 with about 9 minutes to go, and we ended up getting it to 7-6. And there was just under a minute left, and somebody was coming off on a line change, and I jumped on. Johnny Lawless jumped on because he was playing at that time and coaching, and he saw me go, so he sent me, said, just keep going. I went to the slot, Lipsy passed it to me, and I shot and scored to tie it, and the roof almost went off. And I'll never forget how loud it was, because there was only 10,000 fans in the arena that night, and it sounded like 50,000. So for me, that was a single highlight where it wasn't so much that I scored the goal, it was just the whole comeback and how we did it. But obviously raising the cup at the end of that first season was a highlight as well.
Now, for those that haven't seen the updates on social media, you have been over here catching up with another former Storm player, the ex-D-man, Tim Dempsey, during your time back in the UK. You two have been doing the rounds up and down the country. Obviously, you speak to Tim. Do you still keep in touch and speak to any of the old arena guys?
Well, you know, a lot of people say Facebook is bad for this and good for that. It's been really good for us because we've been able to keep in touch with a lot of the ex-players, Alan Huff, Mike Morin, you know, a few of the other guys that aren't in the UK, Sean Byram, Dale Jago, Jeff Lindsay. A lot of the guys from that first season, we were a very tight-knit group and probably one of the closest teams I've ever played on. So I've always kept in touch with you know, 90% of them are on Facebook. So it's always been nice that we've been able to continue our relationship and find out how everybody's doing. And getting back and staying with Tim for, you know, we stayed with them a couple nights last week, then we stay last night and tonight, and then we fly out tomorrow morning. But it's like no time has passed. You know, even at the pub, we're all standing around. It was like, what time's training tomorrow? And it was just so familiar, and it's just been great catching up with everybody.
Now, up until a couple of years ago, you were still very much involved in hockey as well. You were head coach for the Battleford Stars for 4 seasons. You just mentioned to me you'd been doing some commentary yourself over in the WHL over there. You've had time on the ice, you've had time behind the bench, you've kind of followed hockey and played hockey through the course of the last 30 years or so. How much do you think the game has changed over that period? You've seen it in North America, you've seen it in the UK. Anything jump out? How much do you think it's changed?
Well, I think the one thing that's changed the most from when I was playing professionally, even over here, is the amount of interference that was let go back then. And now the obstruction rules come in, and you know, it's hard to get through. It was hard to get through on the forecheck, you know, back years ago. Now the obstruction, it's a little bit more open. I think the game is a lot more structured now. I don't think we played as well defensively as teams do now. Everybody preaches defense first, where we didn't back then. And we just always played a good offense was a good defense. And if you did, you know, happen to slip up, we had John Finney in net. So you know, looking at today's game, it's a lot more structured. The guys are bigger. Everybody's in shape right from day one, where back in the day, you know, there was guys that came to camp to get in shape. But and just the whole physicality there. I don't think there's the big checks, because a lot of the big checks are called now as penalties. Obviously, the whole awareness with the concussions, and we all know it's well documented, the enforcers that, you know, have taken their own lives because of the concussion syndrome that they've been dealing with. So the game has really been tried to get cleaned up in that respect. So a lot of those big hits you don't see as much anymore.
Now, I appreciate you've only had 20 minutes in which to get an answer to this question. It's been a while since you've seen the Manchester Storm play. What are you thinking so far here tonight?
You know what, I was really pleased with how they came out in the first period, because they've only been together one day, and I know there was a big turnover, or not much of a big turnover from last year's team. So the core and the nucleus of the team is back. So they've added a few other guys that, you know, obviously are playing on adrenaline. But the University of Manitoba have been on the ice for 3 weeks practicing. So when you look at both teams, I thought the Storm fared very well. I thought they carried the majority of the play. And when they did break down a couple of times, their goaltender came up big too. So it'll be interesting to see now how Manitoba comes out in the second period. But I think the Storm supporters should be very optimistic with the season, judging by the first period.
Well, it's absolutely great to have you here in the Storm Shelter. I'm sure it's bringing back plenty of memories from back in your time playing here. And great to have you back here supporting the Storm as a former player. Martin Smith, thank you so much for joining us here on Storm TV. You know what, thanks a lot for having me. It's been a trip of a lifetime, and to cap it off, coming back to see the Storm play, it's a dream come true. Well, we'll let you go and enjoy the second period. Martin, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.